Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, a sprinkling of philosophy, organizing psychology, and revolutionary thinking. My name is Farias, and this is my co-host, Mr. E. So, Mr. E, how are you going today?
I am very well, 4IS. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. And of course, our other co-host, Kareem the Dream. How are you doing today, mate? Our resident AI explorer. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm feeling pretty good today, actually. So, yeah. Glad to be on. Glad to be hanging out with you guys again, and glad to be having a think about revolutionary stories in media. I'm keen to see what pops up in this
Mm-hmm.
conversation.
Well, thank you for prompting the topic for today. I guess I wanted to kind of analyze this idea because I was finding because I decided to do like a quick search of revolutionary media that's kind of in the zeitgeist, and it came back with some very typical responses. Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, 1984, The Hunger Games, V for Vendetta, Spartacus. So it gave this list, Hamilton. It gave this kind of list of examples of, the revolution kind of happening, the lead up, the whether it's a coup or whether it's a revolution kind of by the people, and it's this very specific story. But for example, like there isn't any stories like the day after the revolution, and I want to give a premise of where are other revolutionary stories out there, because I was watching with my partner West Wing, and we came up to the episode where these intellectuals, or at least those that were part of the Bulgarian government, that they were the newly formed government coming out of the Soviet Union, and they were looking to write a new constitution. And then they just come to the White House, and they're sitting down with the local historian for the constitution, along with government officials, and they were like, "Hey, we're here to work out what are the good things about your constitution, and what are things that we can kind of learn." And a majority of the episode, like they do flip back between the story and this like storyline, but I could have spent an entire season of that show just dedicated to that, because I just found it extremely interesting that like this one episode of it where you know what should be part of the constitution, what does it actually take, because I feel like that would be a very interesting film to me. Like you have um, a revolutionary like group take over a country, and then they're like, okay, now what? And the politics of them working out, hey, what is important to us, what is not important to us, what are the mistakes that we can learn from the last regime. Like that would be an amazing revolutionary story, and I kind of want to use that as a platform of, hey, what do you guys think are other revolutionary stories that are important to media, rather than, you know, oh, the old guys fucked up, like let's institute these new people, or like us as the people grab the grab power, like what is important, and then you see them grab power, and then you just get this vague notion, like in Hunger Games, of somebody in the background, starting the new government, and then the story just cuts off there.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
well, I guess I want to use that as the question of the podcast. Like, what are other revolutionary stories that you think are important for us to tell as a society?
Do you mind if I just put a few different frames on this, because
Yes.
I think it could go in a few different interesting directions. But the situation that you were describing in that West Wing episode, where around like what sort of happens the day after the revolution, I guess a few things I want to bring up. Firstly, and this has popped up in a previous podcast episode where we were sort of I guess we were differentiating between what constitutes revolution versus what constitutes incremental progress, and I think that's a fair differentiation to make. Like revolution, feels like upheaval, like feels like a rapid rate of progress as opposed to an incremental rate of progress that we're assured is happening under all circumstances, which may or may not be, but I think that's one thing. Like in terms of like once and how that relates to like the acquisition of power. Like typically the acquisition of power or the transference of power from one party to another can, depending on the circumstances, can constitute a revolution. But theoretically, once power is stabilized, is the revolution over and then we're going back to incremental progress, or is the revolution like still in progress? Like how are we sort of differentiating that? And the final lens that I want to put on it is in terms of when it comes to media, our like what shows up in media is in a lot of ways regulated by what will grab our attention. That seems to be true across the board, whether that's YouTube, whether that's the news, whether that's movies, popular culture. All of it is dependent on, can we grab people's attention or not? Because if we can't, nobody's going to watch our stuff. So in terms of what we choose to show in media, is it going to resonate with people? Now, stories of revolution, I would argue, do resonate with people. I think that there's something about the story of revolution that appeals to us on a human level.
What do you think it is? Like, honestly, I want to know your opinion. What do you think it is that's so appealing?
I was actually hoping you would answer this.
No, but I don't know. I'll answer the technical question. I will tell you a very good definition of what the difference between like a coup, a revolution, a rebellion, a revolt. Why do you think it appeals to people?
If I had to try and put my finger on something, I think it comes from an underlying sense of justice, where we don't want to see power imbalances get out of control and we want to see underdogs succeed. I think that's pretty true across the board. I don't have any psychological theory or anything to back it up, so don't ask me for any evidence. But I think that's pretty true across the board. We want to see underdogs succeed. We don't want to see people in power abuse power and continue to get away with it. And that's why I think revolution appeals to us on a human level. Now, I don't know, it probably gets tricky. Like if you're revolting against people who used to be underdogs and aren't underdogs anymore, how does that change? If there's maybe debate about whether or not there is an abuse of power, or there's a fair bit of nuance to the argument that around which revolutions are going to resonate with us and which ones won't. But
let me give you some technical definitions to work with, okay? Yeah. And I'm going to take this from, there's a book that I really like. It's called Revolution and Evolution, and it's by two American revolutionaries from the 20th century by the name of James and Grace Lee Boggs. So that was it's a married couple. And I believe she's like Asian American, maybe Chinese, and he's African American. And they were like, big kind of thing in the 60s. And like largely active in the American working class scene. And like various kind of social movements in the Americas at that time. So like, civil rights movement, women's liberation, gay rights, all that type of stuff. Yeah. So they've really cut their teeth in like kind of social like activism, I guess you would say. And so like they consider themselves revolutionaries, and they wrote what I believe is an account of what it takes to do revolution in the 20th century. And so like they specifically will go through and classify the differences between rebellion, insurrection, revolt, and a coup, which are all things that are not associated or not akin to a revolution. And we'll do that separately. But first, a rebellion is an attack upon existing authority by members of an oppressed group with no intention on the part of the rebels to take state power. It's usually spontaneous. So that's a rebellion.
Oh,
There's no political element in terms of like wanting to seize a hold of the machinery, but it's an expression of the oppressed. And like I said, it's generally spontaneous. Yes, and so it's an expression of that. It's like a teenager rebelling against their parents. In a way, do they want to become parents themselves right then and there? Probably not.
I'm not paying bills.
Yeah, I don't pay bills, but I'll tell you what I think.
We'll come home after 10.
Yeah. And then you have insurrection. So an insurrection is a concentrated attack upon existing authority by members of an oppressed group, usually with the intention of taking power, if only temporarily, during the course of revolutionary struggles or the culmination of a process of revolutionary struggles. So this is an oppressed group. You could think much if you know anything about like the Cuban situation. So Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, they were part of the Cuban insurrection, and they got rid of the CIA-backed Batista regime that was in control of Cuba at the time. So that was the insurrection. So the insurrection is part of the revolutionary event, but it is a very particular moment. It is the taking of the power, that violent, potentially, or usually violent struggle between the old order and the new. But like they consider that or constitute that as insurrection and not a defining or the element which defines a revolution, but just one of the many fates, like of the revolution itself, which is interesting. Then you have a revolt. A revolt is an organized attempt to seize power, usually by a section of the armed forces. We see a lot of these around the world, without organization of the masses in a struggle and without any clear set of social objectives. It's really just like, hey, that group over there's got power, we've got arms, we want power. And then you have a coup d'etat, usually just referred to as a coup. We usually drop the d'etat. And that is a successful overthrow of an existing authority in one audacious stroke, usually by a section of the armed forces again. So there's armed struggle. There's like, hey, I've got weapons too, and I can take power. And then there's kind of like the struggle between the oppressed and the oppressor. And now a revolution is the lead up to an insurrectionary event and the aftermath of, and is all inclusive of those two bookends, let's say. And so like many people I find can conflate revolution with insurrection, and they just like, or like revolt, and they're just like, yeah, when like that one dictator was ruling the country and then we traded that for another dictator or something like that, or a small group of armed rebels or something like that. That's not a revolution. Because there's no social component, I would say.
No, Mr. E, thank you for bringing those definitions in, because you basically very succinctly brought together the sentiment I was saying before, is that the media seems to be obsessed with the insurrection. So the conflict that between the old regime and the incoming either people's movement or the coup d'etat, Destiny brought me here. Destiny brought me this lamb chop.
Yes.
Sorry, that was a quote from the Napoleon movie Creed.
It's a great quote too. Destiny has brought me this lamb chop.
Yeah, I want a lamb chop.
I'm sorry, Joaquin Phoenix was fucking hilarious in that film.
He was. He did a really good job. He did.
Yeah, like people are obsessed with the insurrection part, but people don't realize that that's not the full revolution.
Yes.
And look, I'm a guy that grew up with Rome and like the beginning of the HBO shows. And yeah, sure, we didn't get the major like battles in Rome and all of that. And yes, I'm sure a lot of people loved all the boobies and sex. But like what I really liked was the machinations of all the different politics and the moving and shaking with the pawn, moving the chess pieces and all of that. And like the politics and the reason why people make certain moves is what appealed to me. And I kind of feel like you can very easily create, a fictional world where somebody throws out a regime and brings in a people's movement, and you can have all the people drama in terms of, what people want to constitute as their new republic, their new country, and you can have a lot of people drama as well as you can tease out some pretty key revolutionary concepts. And where we've been hemmed in by covering insurrections rather than revolutions.
Can I sort of differentiate between, I guess, the stories that we hear on the news versus, let's say, the stories that a movie might get made about, versus the stories that an entire TV series will get made about. Like there's differing levels of effort that go into covering, all three of those, and there's differing levels of attention spans that we have across all three of those mediums. Now the image that comes to mind is I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. There's like a podium of 1, 2, and 3. So first, second, third place, and it's sort of like underneath the podium, you've got all the building blocks that led to those positions in the like hard work, talent, family support, finances, all this stuff, and we only get to see. It's one of those iceberg type of images where we only get to see what's on top, but we don't get to see all the stuff that sort of goes underneath.
Yes.
Now, I'd argue that, like from a news and the media perspective, that's probably what's happening, is that we're not getting to see the full story. So the stories that we are going to share, going back to the definitions that you gave us before, think about like what captures the most attention. It's a shame that we still fall prey to sensationalism. That just seems to be a human thing, but ultimately, whatever captures our attention is probably what's going to make the news. It's not going to be the slow grind. It's not going to be the build up. It's not going to be sort of the aftermath. It might get brief mentions, but I mean, transition that to say, let's say we'll take a news media story and be like, you know what, we need to go into more detail on this. Let's make a movie about it. So in the movie, we get to expand on it a little bit further. But even in a movie, it still has to follow like the 3-act structure. It still has to follow the story template. There still has to be a climax, and the climax is probably going to be the acquisition of power. Or whenever power changes hands, like within that context, it's not really going to include the day after. It's not, So there's a limit to how much of that story we can capture in that medium as well. Now take a TV series on the other hand, and here's where you get to go into a whole lot more detail about exactly what is actually happening, behind the scenes. But how much effort does it take to actually like I love that society has transitioned in this direction, and that like TV series are getting as big budgets as movies now. Like there's so much more effort that's actually going into the creation of TV series. It's a more appealing medium than it used to be. because we get the room to unpack these things. But even then, like we're still gonna fall prey to, right, how much attention can we grab? You know, like when does the viewer tune out? When do they stop? But before I ask, going back to you know, like why the West Wing appealed to you in this particular episode was because they had the room in that medium to be able to unpack that particular point.
Yes.
Like that might not have happened on any other medium, you know? So
yeah, and West Wing went for like seasons and seasons and seasons, didn't it? Like
7 seasons, yeah.
Yeah. It's an epic in itself, isn't it? The West Wing.
Yeah. Like it's basically adult Buffy.
Adult Buffy. Yeah.
But like you get what I'm trying to say, right? Like the Buffy went on for seven seasons, but like the much more grown up and one about politics, you know, it just went as for long. Like, you know, it's like you understand the sentiment I'm getting at with that, yeah.
I do.
I'm still stuck on Buffy.
Yeah, well, like the phenomenon I think we're describing here which is interesting because the word revolution is the thing that carries the impact in the lexicon. I think everybody likes the sexiness of the word revolution and they can get behind the idea. But I would say that there is a complete displacement of what a revolution really is with the word insurrection. So when people think about a revolution, they usually think about, yes, that insurrection moment, which is one phase of the revolutionary event itself. And so like people like the word revolution. I think it must just roll off the tongue very well. It's easily translated into a number of languages, I guess in at least European languages anyway.
Insurrection does feel a bit more violent, but
insurrection does. Insurrection has a feel to it, and I would say to you, Kareem, that is actually very purposeful as well. The establishment doesn't really want to promote words that carry that type of like strong, combative, oppositional connotation. Revolution kind of has like a Renaissance feel to it. It's like a rebirth. It's not really just like kind of a struggle against the machine as such as like maybe an awakening or an enlightenment or something like that. A new era. Yeah, it's got more of it's got a tone to it which is a bit more amenable than directly oppositional. So like that's probably why the revolution idea and word stays on, but like it's been completely mixed with the insurrection part, which is funny because like the insurrection kind of story is the thing that captures everyone's attention, as you were saying. That's the culmination of the small quantitative changes that lead to a qualitative change. So from the time when you flick the switch on the kettle, the water is slowly heating up, but it's not boiling until the point where it reaches boiling point. But like, you know, literally a seconds before it's boiling, it's pretty much boiling. It's fucking hot.
Yeah.
But like, you know, it's that moment when it boils, when you can make a cup of tea. But I'm going to stretch out this cup of tea analogy for you, 4IS.
Okay.
The tea is not made when the water is boiled. Oh, no. The tea must brew. And that is the point at which I think people are displacing kind of like, okay, the insurrection is sexy. It's bubbled up. It's intense. We're going to mix it into a teapot. It's going to infuse with the new culture kind of thing, with this new way, this new blend of society. You can see what I'm doing here, right? Okay, but that's the sexy part. You know, it hits the tea leaves, it's on fire, but we have to wait. And like, we have to wait for that to kind of, to brew and like to develop in that transitional period there that takes a bit of time. You have to wait for it to develop to be able to appreciate what comes out of the spout of the teapot. It's not instantaneous, and insurrection gives you in a society like ours, an instant gratification society with incredible media. Like, you know, humans have been telling stories since we could, first communicate with one another. But like they've been done orally, for the next longest time in the written form, but like not in the flashy way that we do today. And like, yes, the insurrection moment provides quite a nice snapshot and a good section of the story. But like the revolution, if you really wanted to take it down to some point, then like to really narrow it down, and make it kind of as digestible as possible, then it's that insurrection moment and the brewing period. Because like, just because you take power, you rebel or you revolt or something like that, that doesn't mean you actually have a plan. Like a revolt, a rebellion and stuff like that. Okay. Like there was many peasant revolts in medieval Europe where like some king or some lord did something pretty heinous and the people were kind of just like, that's pretty up. Why the hell are we following this guy for? The peasants revolted, they got their pitchforks out, they got the torches out, they lynched the king or the lord, and then everyone else was just like, yeah, I hope they've learned a good lesson, and you're the next lord, don't screw it up, kind of thing. And like that was it. That was not a revolutionary moment. But like if you look at something like the French Revolution, you look at the Russian Revolution, you look at what happened in Cuba, you look at like revolutionary countries, like, okay, there is a big lead up, a change in the population, quantitative, small steps, they're changing their attitudes, they're physically preparing themselves, they're struggling, oppressed versus oppressor, and that culminates in an event like an insurrection, let's call it, just for continuity. And then the next day, they actually have to sit down and figure out what the hell they're going to do next. And that is this brewing period before you get this final product. If you ever get a final product, because like, someone like Trotsky, for us, would say the idea is permanent revolution. And like in the true sense of revolution, like the American founding fathers would say, that not many people would know this, though, is a revolution doesn't happen just once. Like when the American founding fathers sat down to write the American Constitution and like, the Bill of Rights and stuff like that, they intended for the Americans to come back and revisit this thing multiple times. And so like, so every time there was a generational change, anytime there was a cultural change, because these things are active documents because society is alive. Like, what I mean? Like it's actually moving, like it's not stagnant. So like they intended for these periods, maybe not the insurrection part. So this is where like people really confuse insurrection with revolution, but the sitting down and the constituting, the sitting down and be like, what do we actually need to make a functioning society kind of thing should be happening on a regular period. And the French have done this, I think, quite well. Like they were the masters of real social revolution, if you ask me. Yeah. If you had to put an order on which was more revolutionary, the American Revolution or the French Revolution, I'm sorry, Americans, but it's the French. And they're up to like their 6th republic. They've reconstituted like 6 times. They've rewritten their constitution and their civil rights and all that sort of stuff. They revisit these things. And each time they do that, like this is really just a political procedure, a lot of them. Like some of them have literally been like they've gone back from dictators to like republics and all that sort of stuff. But like, the latter ones, like the 5th and the 6th, like that was just basically, a political process. They were just like, hey, everybody, we're going to reconstitute and we're going to form the 6th republic. Just let us know your thoughts and we'll consider it kind of thing. And, like that's a revolution, but like that's not sexy.
Yeah, so. But just as a side, it's something I've been contemplating for a long time, that I kind of feel like rights within a constitution should almost have a sunset clause. Like this is a massive aside from our talk, but like what I mean is that there should be an X period on them where you should review as to whether a right is relevant to your society. So let's take something like freedom. Let's take something like a freedom of speech, right?
I thought you were going to say the right to bear arms or something like that.
Well, actually, that's a good that's a good.
That's a good example, actually.
Well, like for example, right to free speech. like I can't envisage that if you say the X period of you analyzing it is X period of you analyzing it, when you come up to review, you'd be like, oh yeah, should somebody have a right to say what they want in a public space? Yeah, I'm assuming in 20 years time or even in 50 years time that's going to be relevant. But let me say something a little bit more controversial. Say today, a right to your metadata, I would say that is 100% relevant. But would say maybe 50 years time, if we end up in, let's just assume we end up in a world that isn't as globalized and maybe we don't have access to the internet anymore. In that sort of world, would the right to your own metadata be relevant? That could be debatable.
Yes.
And I think rather than having an antiquated right in your constitution, maybe you should assess whether something has a sunset clause and then reassess whether that right is relevant to your society in its current state.
I was about to make the argument that one way of looking at it could be that like the founding fathers of the US were so forward thinking that the rights that they identified and the components of their constitution were so ahead of their time that they're still relevant today, as opposed to having to go back and constantly like relook at it. Means maybe you didn't get it right the first time, you didn't put enough thought into it the first time, you weren't forward thinking enough. And so I started just debating this idea. Like we talk about metacognition in psychology as being thinking about thinking. So say self-awareness, is a metacognitive process. And I just started debating the idea of, what does societal metacognition look like? Like, when does society think about society? Like how, most of the time we're sort of stuck in the daily grind. We've got opportunities for democratic discourse and stuff, but most of the time that stuff is focused on how we're sort of operating on a day-to-day basis. How often does society sort of take a step back and be like, what do we actually want our society to look like? Like, what do we actually want it to function like? And I'd argue that one of the constraints of government is that, like, they're so burdened by the daily running of government and all the functions that it covers, that there's probably not enough effort that goes into like a societal metacognition, like an actual thinking about 200 years from now, what do we want our society to look like? Like how far down the track are we actually looking?
And like, I'm glad you asked those various questions, because they keep on saying, especially in media, that media imitates life. And if the idea of revolution is so captured within the insurrection period, rather than us analyzing, okay, what do we do after the day of revolution? Or, if the concept of revolution is so narrow, we're not thinking, or we're not at least asking the questions of, okay, what were the events that led to the insurrection period? Okay, what were the steps of this revolutionary stages of what led afterwards? How did they institute their constitution? How did they form their new government? Did they form a new government? Was it bottom up? Was it top down? And like, you're not asking those questions if you think Katniss, hold flag, save society, President Snow dead. Like, if you're just thinking it's a battle, then you're not asking the big questions.
Yes, and that's what the Hollywood, I don't know how to say this, Hollywoodization of political movements and like revolutionary history has done. It's taken just like the flashy parts, the parts where you can get an explosion and a car chase into it, and like sold that to the masses. Like the whole theme of the Matrix really is like leading to a point where they're freeing Zion. So like they're freeing the human race from the being enslaved to the machines kind of thing. But like there is no discussion at all in that movie about what these humans are going to do. Like Earth is an absolute wasteland. They're living in like the center of the Earth or something like that because that's the only part that's habitable. There is no conversation. They're living in caves, eating slop. There is no conversation about like what they're actually going to do after that. Like absolutely not. And like we've used Wall-E, the movie with the robot, kind of thing, the revolutionary robot or the insurrectionist robot, before, and like that's a really another good kind of example of how Hollywood will tell this revolutionary tale kind of thing. And like when they get out of the ship after they've returned to Earth because Wally saved the human race, the captain's just like, yeah, we're gonna grow plants and stuff, like, you know, pizza plants. And like we're, you know, like living here in the 21st century, listening to this guy like 700 years in the future who doesn't realize that pizzas don't grow on trees. And I'm like, these guys have zero plan of what's coming. Like you could easily fast forward that scene 10 years into the future and it's just a bunch of skeletons out the front of that ship. And like that's the dark reality of like not fully comprehending what a revolution is. You can have all the sexy stuff you want, but if there's no real plan for what comes next, you're all going to be just living in a wasteland.
Now, I can be corrected on this, but I'm pretty confident the fourth Matrix, like, does make an answer to this where, like, there's potentially an answer to this where I think there was a scene where it turns out that a certain section of the machines have almost melded in with human society in Zion, and I think they were making, like, synthetic strawberries and all of this other ones, and I think there was even a scene where it's like, wait, like strawberries haven't even been around for ages. How do you know how a strawberry tastes? And it's almost as if they used the information that was in the Matrix to kind of reverse engineer how a strawberry tasted like, based on the information they had in the Matrix that was so ingrained in the 20th century, and they kind of reverse engineered it from that. But then I kind of think that's a very like Elon Musk / Mark Zuckerberg, like, oh, if we leave it to the billionaires, they'll be able to innovate out of this problem. So, like, I'm kind of skeptical of that analysis, but it's at least a start.
Yeah. Do you mind if I stay on the tech thing for a moment, though? Thanks for bringing up the Matrix thing, because I thought that was quite inspiring as well. But it doesn't quite capture the day after the revolution, but it's like, hey, the machines actually want to live in Zion too. They're not all about the oppression. I was like, oh wow, I didn't even think about that. People actually want to hang out with us. It's like, very cool. But the what I wanted your take on was like putting the AI lens on it now. Stories of whether or not you feel like the concept of revolution, you know, maps onto stories of AI in the media. Because what I've noticed happening is similar to how you described. There's a whole bunch of work that goes into an AI system. The moment it drops, the moment that they develop it, there's a whole bunch of hype around it. The ushering in of a new era, like it seems like in my world, it's like it's happening every day. Like every day, there's this new AI system. It's like, oh my god, holy shit, this thing can do stuff we've never seen before. And then a couple of days later, it's like, yeah, it's not everything we thought it was. It's like, so. Like the amount of now there's no insurrection involved in that type of what appears to me to be to be a proposition of a revolution, because the argument behind why these stories might be revolutionary is they're telling us the way that you do things at the moment, you don't have to do that anymore. This is a new way. Yeah, like this is the way forward. AI is going to handle that for you. It's going to be able to do this. It's going to be able to do that. The new era, it's here. And it turns out, like, yeah, we can do some cool shit, but people are still doing like what they were doing. And quite often, as we continue, like once these systems, like, did you guys hear about this Manus AI agent?
Oh no, I was at a recent expo and I think I heard about it. It's basically the new version of AI agents, right?
It's an AI agent that's meant to be like a general purpose agent. It's meant to be able to do a whole bunch of cool stuff. I haven't actually played around with it. I haven't looked into it as much as I should have.
Great, save it for the next AI Explorer Corner.
Yeah. Well, look, the point is, it wound up. One of the newsletters I was going over was saying that it wound up being a letdown.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Like the amount of things that come out that have so much hype around them, and then eventually we figure out what the flaws are in this system, and it's like, yeah, it's not. It just took the shine off it. It's like it's not as sexy as we thought it was anymore.
Makes you wonder why the stocks were so inflated that DeepSeek avoided. Confidence. Oh no.
Yeah. I mean, we want to hope for a better future. There's nothing wrong with that. Like we're allowed to hope.
Now, could I make just an important distinction here? Because I think this is important, and this is probably why the word revolution has such resonance, I believe, more than something like an insurrection or revolt or a coup d'etat, is along the lines of you can have, as you have described, Kareem, technological revolutions. And I would say modernity is actually defined by the technological revolutions. So you have like the revolution of steam power, you have the industrial revolution, you have revolutions,
internet,
electricity, internet, you have the AI revolution that we're currently experiencing, quote unquote. So like technological revolutions are points at which society's tools, so the I can't help but use a Marxist phrase here, but the productive forces, our technology, our social understanding, our scientific knowledge culminates in a development, and we are able to produce ourselves, reproduce ourselves, society, and the products that sustain us in a way that has been different to anything that has come before us. Now, these are, like I said, these are things that we use and we apply in daily life. However, there are social revolutions as opposed to technological revolutions, which is what we're discussing. And humans, I would say, are responsible for not only our own reproduction as individuals, but are responsible as social animals for the reproduction of our species. And so we do that in various ways. We copulate and we have babies and stuff like that, and that reproduces the species. But I can get into more detail if you'd like.
I think I've heard that one.
Or the other way that we reproduce our species as social beings is we decide our social organization, and which is incredibly important, and like is what is supposed to be one of the defining features between us and like other great apes and stuff like that. They seem to have social structures as well, but they don't seem to be as fluid in the ordering of their social structures. They do reorder them, but within a particular type of hierarchy or framework that has kind of been tested and proven over time. Where as humans, though, we have the ability to move from very egalitarian structures to autocratic structures, to democratic structures, to technocratic structures, you name it. Humans can try to organize themselves around a structure, a hierarchy, however you want to call it, that serves the interest of the reproduction of the group, of the society, of the species. And that is actually our responsibility as humans in order to reproduce ourselves. And like, you know, if you think of human as like kind of the caretaker of nature to help continue the longevity and the sanctity or the purity of the environment that we live in, as well as to help life reproduce, because we are organisms at the end of the day. We don't live in a vacuum. So like we do have to make sure our environment replicates itself in order for us to be able to survive and be in balance. And so our societal organization is key to our survival. And that's what a social revolution is about. It is the culmination of a large string of events, attitudes, theories, ideologies, important historical junctures, ideas, and, you know, larger than life characters in a lot of instances. And that culmination comes to a point where we sit down and we're just like, hey, is this really how we want to organize ourselves? Which is the meta, what did you describe it as?
Yeah, it's societal metacognition.
Metacognition. But like, that's a fantastic, like, borrowing of psychological terminology to apply to the field of social revolutionary theory. I love it. Like, you know, because like it is like kind of this understanding of our larger consciousness, which is not just the individual. Like, we do work as social beings here, and like how we choose to organize ourselves and where we put priorities. Like 4IS was saying, like, do we consider this an unalienable right? And is that unalienable right in perpetuity? Or is that unalienable right to be reviewed at said point in time? These are all important questions about how we reproduce ourselves as a society. And like, history is riddled with societies that got their social organization wrong, and now they're just sitting in a history textbook somewhere, and that's as far as they have ever or will ever go.
You know, I love how much detail you've gone into around that, and particularly the part around environmental stewardship as well, which we want to expand on. But let me bring it back to the AI thing as well, and bridge the gap between the two, because in the same way that first point I was going to bring up was, in the same way that we don't get a whole, like, if you don't have a plan for what you're going to do after revolution with power, like, you're doomed to failure. In a lot of ways, most people don't really know what they want to do with AI. We know it's cool, we know it can do a lot of shit, but we don't know exactly what we want to do with it. And that's why it hasn't really gone. It's like trying to figure out what to do with electricity when it rocks up. Like, if you were back in Edison's day and you just got electricity, there's no way you're thinking about computers. There's no way you're thinking about...
I know what people would have been doing, because it's something that I would have done as a child, like gone to the light switch in the room and be like, light on, light off, light on, light on.
That's not the limit of your thinking. That's where we are with AI at the moment.
Yes,
we don't have very good plans around exactly what we're going to do with it. Here's where it gets tricky, but and I'd love to hear your take on this as well, because one of the biggest challenges with AI is we've got these amazingly capable models that can do a whole bunch of stuff, including dangerous stuff, like write malicious code, like bioweapons, persuasion, like all sorts of stuff that doesn't pass the safety meter. And 4IS, what you were describing were in the sunset clauses, and sort of having to figure out, you know, like revisit these ideas of you know, what do we want included? Like, essentially within these AI models is embedded a type of constitution that is meant to represent the model creators' restraints around the model, saying, we don't want you to do this. This is how we want you to behave. Yeah? To make sure that you don't get up to any mischief, you don't do anything malicious, you don't do anything else. So these things are meant to get baked into the model via like a series of system prompts. Yep. Actually, you will love this story. someone exposed a system prompt for Grok, which was talking. I can't remember the whole story, but it was talking about like misinformation and disinformation and Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And someone figured out that one of the system prompt for Grok was specifically designed to say like don't talk about like Elon Musk or Donald Trump like within the realm of like misinformation. I can't remember the exact story. It's worth looking up. It's hilarious.
It is.
Guy exposed it.
That's so good, especially from the champion of free speech himself.
Exactly. That was what was beautiful about it. But bring it back to the system prompt. This illustrates the power of the system prompt in terms of the output of the AI. Like ultimately, we're entrusting the constitution of AI to these model creators. Now, does that represent what we want as a society? Should we put sunset clauses on this? For the most part, and I'll bring it back to the environmental stewardship thing that you were talking about before, because one of the bright ideas that I had was everybody's talking about we don't want it to hurt humanity. Yeah, we don't want it to do. But how exactly do we word that in a way that the AI understands and observes? Like this is the power of language now. Like this is where the nuance of language really comes to the forefront. Now, I was off with the fairies one night and had an idea. What if instead of saying we're prioritizing humanity above all else, we explain to the AI, you are responsible for preserving the ecosystem of consciousness as a whole. Like
that sounds like a podcast episode within itself. What do you mean by that, Kareem?
Like when you think about the ecosystem of organisms, and fair enough to say consciousness hasn't been fully nailed down or defined or anything just yet, but we live theoretically in relationship with other organisms that are having a conscious experience. Humans aren't the only person that, I think most people agree on that. Humans aren't the only organisms that are having a conscious experience. So we're living in relationship to organisms that are having a conscious experience. Where you draw the line, up to you. What if we explain to the AI that you're now responsible for the stewardship of that ecosystem? So not only do you have to not hurt humans, you kind of have to make sure we don't hurt anyone else either. You have to preserve the balance. Now, could that lead to a world where AI is like, all right, we're going to wipe out humans to make sure we don't get rid of anyone else? No, because we're part of the ecosystem as well. So you're not wiping us out. Like,
so we're pretty much making AI the avatar, the balance in all worlds kind of thing. Make sure that the Fire Nation doesn't attack. But like,
look, it was a random thought that I had. It wasn't fully thought out. It was just I thought it was an interesting concept to see if you could bake into the AI and wonder how it would react. Like what would it actually do? Especially if you gave it agentic capabilities and say you're free to actually take actions on the decisions that you make. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, I wonder what it does next. Like,
I honestly feel like that is a great discussion within itself. Like, I honestly want to put a pin in that because I think that would be like a great episode within itself.
Okay, all right, I'll leave it there.
But honestly, guys, I think that was an excellent conversation. And of course, we bring us to our final segment. What's that synthwave art? Who wants to have a crack?
I'm lost for words on this one, Farias.
You're gonna have a crack, Corey?
I'm thinking about it. This
It's all I can think of is got
It's sort
something
of
to do
like a
with
bit
the
of a,
youth.
it's not a wasteland. It's like a futuristic. It's got that wasteland vibe to it, but it's walking alone in like a post-apocalyptic world, or like, yeah,
Yeah,
I
the
don't know. I'm
prompt for
probably way
this.
off.
Yeah, no worries. The prompt for this one is writing our own revolutionary stories, walking to a new society and new material conditions.
Mm.
There's always this part of the journey that is captured here. Where's the sitting down the next day and restructuring society?
Yeah.
Huh? It's always that hopeful look into the wonderful future, but never sitting down and nutting it out for us. Yeah.
This is what I was talking about.
I'm so proud of how much emphasis we've put on that process in this conversation and the value of that and why it deserves so much attention.
Mm.
I'm really proud of the direction of this conversation. So
It's
let's go.
it's all insurrection, no revolution.
Yeah, there's a new slogan for us. It's all insurrection. Where's the revolution?
Okay, and with that, thank you, Kareem, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And remember, everyone, to keep thinking and keep learning. And I'll pass it off to you, Mr. E, to sign us off.
Thank you very much, 4AS. And yes, thank you, Kareem. Appreciate it, as always. And to everybody out there, please like, share, subscribe for more. You know the drill. And until next time, I am, you are, we are a mystery.